Hey, welcome to the Monday stream. We're going to get going with our Outlaw painting, but we're going to, of course, warm up with our Monday morning warm-up life drawing sketches. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so this is sort of where we left it last time. Welcome to everybody. So for where we're at in this stage, we're fairly good to go on some rendering now with the body form. So when it comes to producing artwork and looking at reference and painting with reference and drawing with reference, it's not always just about life drawing and sketching, although that's a really good way to warm up. It can be about looking at these forms in 3 dimensions and learning how to paint them with light, and then also with color and texture. So that's mostly what we're going to be doing today, but of course we're going to do our typical warm-up. So let us get into it. I'm just going to start a new folder, and we're going to be looking at our virtual pose model. For today, she's going to be laying on what looks like a clear exercise ball. So it's going to pick a random position and get into it. Vacation went well. Thank you for asking. It's good to be back. Good to be back. Saw some interesting animals out there. Saw a grizzly bear mother with a baby. Saw a black bear, mom and baby, another black bear, a caribou, a elk, no moose, but yeah, it was pretty good. Can't complain. All right, let's get some of that sketching going on here. Saw a dead raccoon. Oh no, just before I left, I saw one in Vancouver. We've got lots of raccoons here. Or as people like to call trash pandas. So let's just kind of keep this real. I'm going to kind of grip the end of my pencil so I'm not getting too kind of close with some of the gestural sketching. Yeah, the panda population, the raccoon population in Vancouver is pretty ubiquitous. They're everywhere. You can actually go down to a park here, one of our largest parks, and you can kind of count on them being there almost every day. People feed them cat food and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a good thing for them, but they get used to that, and they always show up there waiting for people to feed them. So I'm just going to switch brushes here. It's not my favorite brush in the world. I think we've got a good... Yeah, this is our favorite, chat's favorite. Trash pandas, yeah, it's a pretty cute name. Let's just turn this pose a little bit and kind of rough things out here. Thinking about that rib cage, that upper arm, to that lower arm. Always good to start with some Monday morning exercises. Eric's stream was great. You watch the stream now on Fridays. Yeah, Eric's great. Yeah, I was happy he was able to take my happy to take my spot on Thursdays with some of the concept stuff. So yeah, Eric does our illustration. He teaches the concept stuff and also our illustration course. So very, very awesome guy to watch work in there. So. Good stuff. All right. So let's grab a new pose in here. We're not going to maybe spend as much time warming up today because we want to get to some kind of more of our rendering. Today we're going to work on some of the volumes and values of those things. So let's get the head up there, just kind of really keeping it loose in there. Thinking about that spine, the glute. I really can't get enough of this brush. I love it. I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller on my upper screen. It was really interesting to see differences between how you approach concept art and how Eric approaches it. Just really interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's a wide variety of ways to approach painting and drawing. That's why it's good to always just pay attention to people, not even just instructors, but other practicing artists, other would-be artists. I mean, everybody's, you know, the experiences are so much different from person to person, so much more different from person to person that you can really learn a lot from different people's approaches and adapt it to your own. Because there's many different ways to actually achieve, artwork in different painting packages or just even with different principles applied. So it's always good to see what else is going on out there. Never stop learning. Let's get that other hand in through there. Hey, good to see you too. I saw your friend painting their car. That was very artistic. I don't know if I could paint that on my car, but creative in any case. What was the theme of it? It kind of looked like maybe some sort of zombie vibe. Blood on the car for some reason. It's expression, I guess, you know? I saw that she masked it out anyway. That was good. Didn't get any kind of, it looks a little bit more professional that way. It's almost feels like there should be some refraction through this big exercise ball that's clear that she's leaning on, but there's not. It's not that much of a refractive index on clear rubber, plastic, whatever you want to call it. But you do get those rings. Have I watched the show Sabrina on Netflix? No, I don't really watch much TV, to be honest. Apparently it's not over yet. She's about to do something more at the front of the back of the car. I figured, I looked at some of the pictures and saw that, well, there's so much more canvas there on that car to be painting on. So it's always fun to see, though, people personalizing their gear. All right, let's switch up our pose. Getting this guy sitting in what looks like a hula hoop. Very suspiciously. Yeah, nice. I bet. Let's turn this guy around a little bit. I guess whenever you draw bloody handprints and blood leaking from windows, it might incite some curiosity. Do get such a great sort of soft brush feel from this. Very nice strokes. Get that underlying foot in there. This guy's got a ponytail at the back. Gonna zoom in on some feet here. Switching it up. The pandemic, yeah. I'm kidding. His toes are all sort of tucked underneath one another, which looks a little bit weird, to be honest. Something I do talk about with my students, if they have a particular problem with being overwhelmed by figure drawing, is to break it down into smaller digestible chunks. So, you know, if you're having to draw the entire foot, right, or sorry, the entire body, sometimes it's just so much to consider, making sure everything looks correct, that it's just better for you to sometimes just break them down into their constituent parts, like maybe just the toes, right? Getting a sense of where some of those volumes are, right? And just working with it that way can kind of sometimes relieve the stress that you get from that you can have from thinking about all of those things. I think that one of the major things that I find, I'd say with students, is that everybody wants to kind of run before they can walk. And I mean, I'm not even immune to that. I think as a younger artist, I always wanted to kind of just get on with it and be good, right, without all of the practice. But it really does take a ton of practice to kind of get that stuff working right. So it's almost like second nature, right? Practice. Like with badminton, for instance. I noticed that you were playing that, practicing away at that stuff. I mean, playing guitar or, you know, you name it. Surgery. I mean, a surgeon that's done it a million times is gonna, well, probably not a million times, but you know what I mean. Many times is gonna be way better at being a surgeon by the end of that, right, than a brand new surgeon. But everybody's got to start somewhere. So, raccoons where I live, they are so cute. I'm hoping to get one as a pet or raccoon dog. I don't know if they're great pets, to be honest. They're fairly feral. There was a TV show, I guess, in Japan where there was a raccoon on it, and a whole bunch of people went out and got raccoons as pets. And of course, after having them for a bit, realized they're not great pets. released them into the wild, and now they pose a significant threat for some of this old wooden structures because they live underneath, say, old temples, and their urine and feces, I guess, just rots away at the struts. They're cute, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if they make great pets. And also, you know, they deserve to be in the wild instead of locked in an apartment while you're at school or at work. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's sort of the mangled foot of this model. Let's get a foreshortened view of some of the body parts there. Yeah, welcome. Well, no, we're talking about keeping raccoons as pets, which I was not suggesting is a good idea, but to each their own. But I was talking about how they're a problem in Japan with because they got into the wild. I think they're invasive. I don't think they're natural to Japan, or at least the ones that have been released have no natural predators, as far as I understand, and so they just kind of live and propagate and cause problems, like most of what humans do. Release some sort of animal with thinking that it'll help, or at least even by accident, and then got some sort of ecological issue on our hands. They're survivors, though. They can climb trees like nobody's business. They're very wily in how to get into garbage cans and stuff like that. Just like crows, very smart, able to live amongst humans with, I would say, relative ease. Same as skunks here. Skunks don't have a problem. Even wild animals are afraid of skunks. Ponytail coming off the back. Domesticated red foxes. Yeah, that would be interesting. Finished your 2-week trial course. Awesome. How did it go? Hopefully well. I assume it was with Brian. Let wild animals be wild. Amen to that. I think even domesticated animals, a lot of like kids want their parents to get them a dog or a cat, and then the reality sets in that, you know, there's the cute moments, but then it's an animal that needs to be taken care of, and then that's when it starts, you know, the cool factor wears off a little bit when it becomes work. And the expense, especially for taking care of animals, right, if they're sick, is none too cheap. Speaking from experience. Guy's sitting in his hula hoop there. I'll zoom in on a hand here. First time doing character design, not used to drawing humans, so have a lot to learn. Yep, that's something you always need to practice anyway. Anatomy is sort of like knowing. I mean, just like anything, I guess. Well, like I was talking about before, it's if you don't use it, you start to get rusty at it and lose it a little bit. I was gonna say like riding a bike, but you can kind of get on a bike. It's a little bit, you know, if you haven't ridden a bike in a while, it can be a little bit wonky. You're definitely not going to be super confident with it if you haven't ridden a bike for years. Scotland is boring. Overflowing with stray cats. Yeah, I mean, domesticated animals, specifically cats, make a huge dent in natural bird populations. As cute as they can be. Thinking about where those knuckles are underneath there. It's always good to not just draw what you see, but kind of also make note of where things are, right? Sometimes different photographers or just the way the photograph has been taken might not reveal some of the forms, and therefore you wouldn't get as much practice maybe as if you're actually kind of drawing those things in there. So always good to have that be reinforced when you're sketching like this, right? So yeah, we got our set of sketches going on here where we're warming up, keeping it fairly loose just to get the hand-eye coordination going. We're gonna switch gears now back to our character here that we've built up through some of our reference there. We're going to start getting some volumes going on in here. So add some mice, rats, and guinea pigs, but no chinchilla. Reptiles. Yeah, I had an iguana once upon a time. It's good in theory, at least for me. In execution, not great. So I was lucky enough to find somebody who really enjoyed lizards and was able to give them away. But I learned my lesson there. I'm more of a dog person. Had a cat, but had lots of cats. But I'm more of a dog person, so. That will be my next animal. Keep going, decide on a mentor. Yep, that depending on their availability as well. But there's definitely everybody's awesome that we've got on the team right now. So really good range of people to pick from. You can recommend. It's mice. No chinchilla. They was weirded you out. Did you look at the werewolf cat? No, I didn't. Oversized hamster. What type of dog? Is it a wolf dog? I don't know. Are you talking to me? Okay, so we're gonna start blocking in some value, not with that brush because that brush is taking too long to render. So I'm just gonna go in and kind of. I'll actually probably just drop in a background, new background gray, grayscale backdrop. We'll go 50% because her skin tone is going to be probably around a 50% gradient. So I might as well start with that as a ground. And then I'll just delete that layer, and then I'll go in there with a hard round brush. Let's go find... turn off our linear dodge. We maybe want to try something that's got some pen pressure on it. So I'm just going to use this hard round brush to block out some of the values on her. So I like her as this sort of mid-tone. So I may actually just lighten this up a bit. Actually quite a bit. And then on this layer, we'll call it our value. We'll get in there and we'll start kind of blocking things out. You'll be used to seeing me do this if you've been through the intro course. So I'm going to be a little bit looser with it just because I want to kind of go a bit faster. But sometimes if I'm just locking these things up and going to be painting on it later, I'm a bit more careful with mapping some of the stuff. I can always clean it up later, so it's no big deal. So we'll go through and just kind of stub that in. The dog... because I'm in a condo, and it's a fairly small condo, it'll be a small dog, smaller dog. So just gonna block that stuff in, not being too precious where some of those values are going, just kind of making sure that everybody's covered up. Just gonna mid-tone skin. So I want to kind of break up some of the stuff she's wearing. So it's, and she's an outlaw, right? So we don't want her gear to be too kind of bright. I don't think that's not going to send a good outlaw vibe. I want it to be sort of like brooding and heavy. So I'm just going to amp that up a bit more. Bobcat as a pet, interesting. I have not seen such a thing. get that leg over on the side. So I'm kind of just planning with my values here where certain things will go. I want the hat to be fairly dark, potentially. Her hair will be dark. Bandana will be darkish, but not quite as dark. Saddle will be a little bit kind of lighter brown. And what I'm doing with this as well is I'm trying to make these things show up against one another. So you can kind of just plan and go through those things and see what works. The horse itself might also be dark. You can always change it, right? When you're sketching this stuff out in the first pass, you can always go back and change things. So just investigate, see whether this feels good. That's a lot of the times when you're doing concept art, what you want to be doing is investigating possibilities for things instead of, you know, thinking that your first idea is always your best idea. Not always the case. Even get in there with some background elements. Hello, artist man. Hello, digital artist. Do I ever use the mixer brush? Sometimes. For people that have been painting in Photoshop for a long time, the mixer brush is a newer, well, it's not new at all, but now, compared to the people that have been using it a while, it's fairly new. So just having a chat with some of the mentors, the concept program, or just some of us just out of habit don't use it because we haven't got used to using it. But it is an interesting way of kind of getting in there and blending things without the expense of the smudge brush. So it's a totally valid tool. But can you achieve things without that tool? Absolutely. Kind of blocking in some shapes back here. Always forget to, yeah. It's something, you know, that to get the kind of traditional media feel though is still you know, it's definitely something to play with, right? Because you can get some, depending on your brush. Maybe you find like a good media brush, like a rake, something like this, to kind of scoop things in and out and kind of make turbulent stroke mark making. It can be a pretty cool addition. I would tend towards it if I wanted that media feel on a larger piece, just because I do find that smudge, when you make it big enough, it struggles with the mathematics as Photoshop's trying to process everything if your brush is too big. So that is when I would use it. It's just in terms of my regular workflow, it doesn't always make it in there. Because again, as you guys get better at painting and drawing and have more experience, your specific workflows will be different from person to person. Maybe by a lot, maybe by a little, but it will be different. And so you get used to how you can kind of create artwork fairly quickly, and you tend towards that, obviously, to get the work done on time for client. So yeah, it's something to think about. I'm gonna kind of have her pant legs be a little bit kind of worn out on the top, maybe on the knees, sort of just kneeling down to track people or whatever it is she does. I think the boots will be a bit more kind of reflective though, sort of like a polished leather. That stuff in there. Go try and find a few spots where we can indicate some volume, some highlight in her arm. I feel like her guns are gonna be like pearl, super bright. Just gotta be careful when you're doing this. I had to double check there to make sure I wasn't painting on the wrong layer, which can be sometimes you get carried away. What happens? Start painting on the wrong layer. Make her horse blanket a little bit lighter. Maybe the saddlebag will be dark. Not huge differences between these things, but just enough that the eye can notice it and pick it up fairly fast. So I just want that stuff to be red. Decent speed, so people aren't confused by the masses and details. Imagine she's kind of resting. Looking at her reference here, she's kind of reaching behind herself onto the exercise ball. And we changed it a little bit, so I want her to be kind of leaning backwards a bit and resting on the back of the saddle. Just kind of dropping a shadow in there, so that's a little bit more extreme. I like this Little bandolier sticking out. Maybe we should have a crazy big belt buckle. Get any of the tack to be a bit brighter. I'm thinking about the muscles on the horse. Might actually be nice to have a bit of a pattern back there. So it's a bit dappled instead of just one solid color. The nice thing about that is it'll feel kind of less like purebred. For her design, it might be nice that, you know, she's not riding on the super, you know, I guess expensive horse. It kind of makes her feel a bit more gritty. And it might be really nice to kind of pop some of the hair and other things on the old girl. Back to the background, I feel like I want to give the background a little bit of a darker vibe. Maybe the clouds are kind of coming in. It's going to be a nice way to push all of the value towards the contrasts towards her. The clouds are top of valley that's fairly close to us. Kind of think of the Monument Valley with the formations of rock kind of poking out. Not feeling too bad. All right, start blocking that stuff in. Doing it in passes as well. I don't want to get locked into kind of being too precious about one area. Especially in concept art, that can lead to bad times if your client ever calls in a piece before you're expecting it to have to be delivered. Sometimes they do that. And you want to make sure that you've at least roughed things out in separate passes so it's not all you haven't just touched the face and that's it, right? Ebola. No, I didn't know that. What happens in the same house gets COVID and Ebola? Would they mutate into one? I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that they're... I don't know, but I'd imagine there'd be just... that person would have a hard time. Embarrassing question. 2-point perspective. Can there be more than 2 vanishing points? If it were more than 2, then it'd be multi-point perspective. If you're going to stick to a firm 2-point, then it's sort of like, yes, you can. If you're only using vanishing points left and right and not zenith and nadir, you can create multi-point vanishing points where just say different cubes are turned around in space and they both have a left and a right vanishing point. So you can, but it's a little bit more kind of complex than that. Hello there. Hello. It's weird to it's a weird position to be at a junior level when you're applying for jobs. Sometimes you're under or overqualified for. So frustrating. Yep, can be. It just depends on the job. I'd say it's rarer that you're underqualified or you're overqualified as a junior, unless you're dealing with like some indie group that has no money and has never built a game before, film, whatever it is. More often than not, you're going to be underqualified. Just because you don't have the experience, right? Like your artwork can be great, but you just don't have the experience of having actually put that into play, right? Which is a huge thing. There's lots of people on ArtStation that have really beautiful artwork, but may be terrible to work with just because they need a ton of time to work on their work that they need to be from their imagination and not synthesized from a client brief. A lot of things at play there, and that's, when you go in, when somebody is looking at your portfolio, they're looking at the technical execution. If they're willing to, and they see in your CV or your resume that you don't have the experience, but they're okay with that, that's when they'll get you in for the interview to see, ask you those questions, like how long does it take you to work on stuff? Are you good at taking feedback? Those kinds of things. And if they think that you're making it up as you go along, or they just don't trust your answers, that's when they're just not going to go forward with you, right? So and even then, it's sometimes you get people into a job and they just can't hack the workload, or they're just not used to it as a junior, and that's the gamble you take when hiring. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. You have to move along. But that's a lot of jobs. I think that's almost any job, is people put their best foot forward in terms of hiring best candidate, but then sometimes it's just, you can't know based on their experience or lack thereof, or portfolios or whatever it is, right? So definitely had to deal with that in terms of junior artists before. So I'm just going in here and kind of chopping up some of these values now, just cleaning them up because I want to have a better sense of where everything goes. If I erase too much, that's fine. I'll just go fix it. But keeping it loose for the Mondays. So we got her going on there. Just going to go touch up some of the spots that I've painted over or erased too much from. There's a position storyboarding for Nickelodeon animation, but you had to have at least 6 years experience. It's devastated, but I did recommend my storyboard mentor for the job, I'm guessing. It's getting censored for me on the chat. I'm sure it's not bad. Let's actually get into using the mixer, just to kind of break up some of this business on the horse. It's not too bad. It's almost like horsehair. It's not quite there, but it gives us a nice little feel. Some of that cheek up here. do for us? Not great. Just have to work your way up through internships. Yeah, internships are definitely one way. Getting involved. I mean, a big thing with people is they want to see that you've done stuff, right? And so that when you see somebody asking for 6 years experience, some people, some studios, some hiring managers, they will absolutely be intent on that being the case, right? That you've had that much experience. But sometimes it's just sort of like a general guideline of like they want you to have had experience, like plenty of experience in a job. So if you can show that you've got something similar, then they may be willing to make an exception or kind of surpass the rigid hiring guidelines, right? But at the same time, they probably know that people that have been in the industry long enough, they want that quality of person that's been through productions. Maybe that's 4 or 5 productions or even less than that, right? That they're not going to have to do too much hand holding and that they can just set you to work. Because in this modern time of development for video games, film, TV, it's expensive to make these things. And so less and less do they want to hire people that cost them money overall to make sure that they're working properly. Where you will find that more often is when people need to save on wages, and so they'll hire juniors and they'll be more apt to kind of train them to save cash. There we go. I'm going to start to get into the face a little bit here. I'm just going to get her cigarette holder. So we get kind of a basic look for her. Take a step back, so to speak. See how she's doing. It's pretty good. Applied for said Door Explorer storyboard. Portfolio was full of horror movie. Yeah, you got to kind of tailor things sometimes. It's not enough to just be like, hey, look, I did a thing. You know, just think about there are people that would love to work on that, for instance, and they would have Dora-esque storyboards, so it's just going to be more of a synergy there, right? So, you know, sometimes it'd be good to even just, if you know you want to apply for a job, tailor make a couple pieces where it's applicable, right? And then the other stuff can just show up as experience overall. Dora explores lycanthropy. That would be actually pretty cool. Dora. Maybe we'll do that for the concept stream once we're done with the sci-fi thing. Might be that there's like a Van Helsing Dora, which I'd watch, even though I don't watch much TV. I could definitely get into that. closer here. When I get this close, I might switch to an airbrush just because I want to start feathering some stuff a little bit more. Start giving her sort of like a little bit of a cheekbone in there, some shadow, some shade on the lower part of the jaw. Overall, sort of maybe a lot more light fall off on the other side of her face. Might need to shave down a little bit on her hat. I'm gonna give her some raven feathers here. Dial back the blood. Nice. Have I watched the viral video, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared? Nope, I haven't. The Netflix controversies, I have not. I don't really pay attention to that stuff, to be honest. But I'll humor you. What's up? What happened? Kind of giving her heavy eye makeup. We'll see how we like that later. But I want her to feel like she's a dark, mysterious character. See ya. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Just gonna drop some shadow overall over the eyes. I still want that to be a harder edge. Although we could bring that shadow in a little bit higher on her head up in here, maybe. Just so we can see into the face a bit more so she's not total shadow. There is something nice about her eyes being kind of harder to see. Or maybe it drops across the face the other way. Just get a little hit of that eye. go through and try and mold the volumes of the forearms, the biceps, the clavicle, chest region, neck, everything in there that needs sort of volume, right? Cuties and unpregnant. Huh. How about that? We're in a time where there's people do definitely find problems in a lot of stuff. Not necessarily a bad thing. Not necessarily a good thing either, depending on what it is. Let's get some shadow under there. I feel like we're going to get kind of some highlights on the top ridge line of these ruffles. I kind of foresee them as almost like leather ruffles. You should get this kind of cool leather, like vest corset thing. We haven't drawn those ones on the other side. That's all right. We can kind of just stub them in. Find some spots to get some of the reflection happening. Add a little bit of catch light on some of elements of her face. I want to make it feel like it's super hot and like desert, you know, sweating a little bit like we would if we were out in the desert. A little bit of that shadow in there. Let's get some of those tubular volume set. So I just locked the pixels so I can kind of just go through here and sweep through certain areas. I just want sort of like a general wear and tear on those jeans. We'll say they're like dark denim. That other leg over there. Then I'm just going to go through and hit some of this tack. Be sort of like a dark leather. If I want to get a little bit of pressure off of my brush, I might throw in some or reduce some of the opacity. I don't want it all to be like super intense. Just want to kind of feather in some shadows in those certain spots. It's your brother's 40th. Getting old, hey? Get some of that darker value in these boots. I just want them to be darker overall. They're not kind of standing out enough. So I'm just going to kind of nuke those a little bit more. Same as I'm going to make her gloves kind of match. Let's go through and tag some of these areas that are looking like they need some loving from that from the value differences of that kind of like arch off into shadow for the base of the horse, or the blankets at the base where they meet the horse fur. And I mean, if it's really bright out here, you're gonna get some light that kicks up underneath. But I would want to establish the shadows first, so that stuff can look a little bit more believable. Come through here and hit the horse there. Sort of like all this really soft occlusion really starts to help build a sense of volume, sense of depth on these things, wherever light's not able to bounce around a ton. So not looking too bad. Not looking too bad. I would be crying. I'd be crying. Wait, what did it say? Damn, this is coming together at a good pace. Yeah, it comes from practice. I mean, with a client, you'd probably be going a bit slower than this because you might want to, with them, decide, you know, like, do we want these things this dark? You know, it is a really collaborative situation when you're working as a concept artist. Because they have their own ideas of the way they want things to look, and that can be incongruent with maybe what you have envisioned, right? So you kind of got to get on their track, and you know, iterations do that. But when you're doing it for yourself, you get to decide, right? If I'm doing something fairly quickly, then instead of going through some of the experimentation, I might just go forward with an idea, right? Which is not super let's say, indicative of the way it would work. But, when you're producing your own artwork, there's just one less person involved, right? At least, as you are your own client. I'd be crying if I turned 30, never mind 40. Thank God that's a long time away from me. Best years of my life, though, for sure. I do not miss being younger. But to each their own. When do you find yourself using complete black? I think of black and white as finishing touches in terms of value. If you use 100% white, right, there's nothing beyond that value-wise where you can see anything, right? If it's pure white, then that's it. You've used the brightest value, and there's nothing else that you can be seen in terms of contrast. Same as black. It's like looking into the void. There's no light, right? So what I tend to do in my drawings, just as a rule of thumb, is I save approximately 10% of my brightest values, 10% of my darkest values. And then at the end, if I want to plug in the deepest, darkest little crack in a rock or on an armpit or something like that, then I can plug in that value only as much as I need it. But at least I've left myself some value to work with at that point. So it's just a strategy, really, to make sure everything looks good, right? And that you save some value for yourself. Like the black lines in this, if we get rid of them, we have a pretty good build for her without them, right? So, I mean, that's something else in terms of a direction that you could travel. You can always just use these as a guideline and then go in and start to clean up some of these things, because, it's been almost our blueprint for the build. Yeah. Canvas size. Well, think of it this way. For concept art doesn't traditionally make it to print, whereas illustration does. So an illustrator is going to really have to figure out what the format is and then be working with like a 300 DPI so that it can print well. Whereas a concept artist, I send this to the modelers, I send this to the surfacers, the art director. They're all looking at the stuff on their screens, and then they might translate that in different ways. But even at that point, there's a minimum of how high res it should be, and it's usually whatever the going resolution for screens is. I would say is the bare minimum. If you can paint at a higher resolution, then do that. But 4K would be usually what I would want to paint at. So sometimes I'll just open a piece like this at 4,000 by 4,000 pixels as a start. I might up-res it. Typically in up-resing, I'm going to do that in the process sketch phase, right? When we're at like something like this level. If I'm pretty happy with something at that point, then I don't want to up-res when I'm at this level, because things are going to start to get blurry when Photoshop tries to upscale the pixels. It'll do its best, but it won't make super sharp edges on anything. So that's rule of thumb for you. Courage the Cowardly Dog. No, I have not. When you have line art that's a little thicker like this, do you like to merge it with your values or turn it off towards the end? There's a number of things you can do, right? Like one of the things that I can do right now is I can highlight my line layer, and I can actually just go in and nuke it a bit and keep it around, but I just lock the values, and then I can go and select similar values in that zone, and I can kind of start to paint it out a little bit, right? Just to lose it. Like say the horsehair, I can paint down, still keep it, and if I ever do lose it, I can just go with a darker value and kind of bring it back a little bit. So it might be that I kind of use those darker lines at the bottom as shadow, and then I can blend that in. If say I wanted to blend that in, which sometimes I do this, what I can do, what I'll always do if I'm going to be destructive with any of my artwork, I'm going to make a copy and I'm going to lock that copy, right? Turn that off. And then with this, what I can start doing, I can turn off the alpha lock. I can get into my mixer brush or my smudge tool, right? And then I can start using my smudge tool. Whoops. That is super hardcore heavy. Let's go pick a different brush here. And make that a bit bigger. There we go. Just selected my scatter brush. But I can go in and I can kind of start to blend that in if I want, right? Maybe subtly taking one edge off, leaving the other. Can be a nice way to just create edges. You can see at this point with this specific smudge brush, you see Photoshop thinking for quite a bit. So that might be a good time to get in there with the mixer brush and start mixing things up a little bit. Let's try different. Yeah, see something like that. That one's just kind of pulling everything with it. And so that's when you need to kind of get into your wet load mix up top, depending on the brush. Let's go see if we can kind of smear things around a little bit. Photoshop's thinking, having a bit of a hard time here. I did notice that there's a couple updates for Photoshop, which is always scary. See what Photoshop is broken now, or Adobe is broken now. Twitch channel, you can just search CG Spectrum on Twitch, and the stream will be up there. Do you get giant bats where you live? No, I don't. We get small guys. Australia, I've seen the giant fruit bats. They're pretty creepy as well. It's like they're screeching in the night. You hear them from a long way off. If there's a whole bunch of them, then you really start to kind of hear it all. So Photoshop is locking up on me. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. Thank God. Important lesson here. I was starting to sweat there because I have not saved this at all. So all of that work, because of my shenanigans with the brushes, could have been lost if because I didn't save. So sometimes you get wrapped up. I'm usually pretty good about it, but situations like that can happen. So just beware. I'm just gonna get rid of that other file so Photoshop has enough wits about it to be using some of these tools. I'm working on an old version of Photoshop because the newest ones have not been great. The newest updates have not been super great for my setup. And some of the students have been having problems with the new one, and other mentors. Some of the mentors use like CS6, so it goes back. Because you just need to be able to paint, and with some of the older versions of Photoshop, it was absolutely fine. Anyway, so we're trying to blend those lines in. Photoshop's having a bit of a hiccup. Sometimes that can just be because of the size of the brush, what the brush is doing, and so sometimes you need to figure out, well, is that a good method by which to be painting, and maybe make some adjustments to that there. Let's see if we can get So it's picking up the color. So that's why I'd need to play a little bit more with the mixer, just because, you know, we don't want to ruin things. So you see with the blend brush, you can just kind of soften some of those lines in there. For me though, I mean, I'm not really at that stage yet where I'd be worrying about that. If anything, I've kind of moved away in the last little bit of actually blending my lines in. I'd be more apt to painting them out and then flattening the whole piece, right? So sort of like what we're seeing here is I can lock that line, and then I would go in and just start to knock down a little bit of that line work on the outside edge using a value that's really close to the shadow, right? Because we only really need it to be able to see where things go, and then you can opt to kind of paint on top of that, right? So say, let's actually do that in the face with our last few minutes here, because we wouldn't get these really harsh lines in there. So I'm just going to grab something of a mid-tone and then just go through and then knock things down by quite a bit, just to the point where I can still see them, right? If you ever lose it, you can go back a little bit with the line work, just so that you barely kind of chop in some of those values. Again, we don't want to completely lose everything. Like the nostril is an example of something that's going to probably be fairly dark, right? The eyelashes, especially if she's wearing sort of eye makeup, could be very dark. If her hair's dark, you know, we would keep that decently dark. Otherwise, we can start to kind of nuke that stuff. Always look back at our model. She's got fairly dark hair. So we might even at that point go back into our value and darken some of this, right? And kind of lock the pixels in there. Feels pretty good. I'm gonna go kind of darken some of her hair in there. I'm gonna keep her eyebrows fairly dark. That's sort of the contrast range of her. And then it can be at this point where I can drop that stuff down, right? So let's just, we've got our line copy in case we screw up. Let's experiment with what that might be. I'm gonna save in case I blow everything up. And you'll see some artists do that. They'll go down a road of exploration and they'll make sure that they can go back, right? So it's sort of like, oh, what's this side road like? Maybe it's a dead end. I'm gonna go investigate. Maybe that sucks, and I'll come back. But I need something to come back to. Otherwise, you're gonna be sweating when you haven't saved, it crashes, or you haven't saved and you don't like where you went. You have to repaint everything. Caffeine. So let's investigate, see how that would go. So what I've done now is I've combined everything down into that layer. We can see if our tool is going to be of any use in this space. So I've got my smudge. So it's not too bad. Make that a little bit smaller and I can kind of get in here and start to kind of just meld some of those things together. The risk is that I'm going to lose some of the direction of some of these things. I might go and pick my brush setting. I might go into my shape dynamics and my pen pressure set, scattering. Gonna maybe make our count a little bit more intense. I don't want to jitter too much of it. We'll see how much that actually blends. So that's a little bit better. So I can come into these areas and start to kind of just unify some of the strokes so they don't feel so splotchy. And then what you're going to see is that I can come in and I can tag just the edge of that that line value and start to integrate it in with the rest of the values. Certain things you're not going to want to do that with, like you don't want to any sort of kind of contrasty eyes. Like if you're looking at the camera, the edge on these glasses would be more sharp against the skin, whereas some of these the features on, you know, hands or faces or whatever, they're going to roll off and be a little bit more smooth. So you just be careful of that stuff. You don't want to accidentally eliminate the things that you need. So with the scarring, you know, the brush is a little bit big for it, but I can go in there and at least I can kind of paint down some of the graphic quality of the line work, and that would be a place where we'll see in a minute I can come back in on top and paint some of the details back in or out, whatever I want, right? But it's, as a scar, I would want it to fade into the face a little bit more to be part of the dermis instead of feeling like it's just mud on her face or, you know, some sort of material. And scars can be like that, but they can also be sharp, so that would be where I'd go in and play with that a little bit more. But the jaw is a good place where we'd want to softly blend that in. Yeah, I suppose you could say it like that, kill the line intensity. We're reducing the graphic quality of the line. We're still using part of the edge, so like a line has got two edges on it, right? We're resolving to keep one of them potentially, and or just completely obliterate it in certain cases. But yeah, in a roundabout way, we're using it to basically do away with some of the intensity of it. So I might do that a little bit up in the eyebrow. Again, I'm not stressing out here because I'm losing stuff, because I know I can go back in and paint it in. I've got a pen pressure set on this specific brush, so I can press really lightly and it will barely smudge. So be sure to know how to use your tools. Some of these I would also maybe leave for a little bit later when I come back and I want to actually cut in some more sharper detail or bring shadows back. The cool thing is obviously that I've got these guys, so if I lose anything big time, then I can always revisit the original layer to see what I blew up. Like the clavicles are way too dark here, so what I'm gonna probably do is I'm gonna blend them in a little bit. I'm gonna just grab an airbrush and paint them out. It's one of my favorite ways of painting this method, just because it feels a lot closer to me to traditional painting where you're pushing and pulling pigment around. You are scumbling and blending things in, right? So it's scratching that traditional itch. So let's go grab an airbrush. Let's up the ante on the opacity. I'm just going to get her hair kind of rounding the ear in there, and then maybe kind of coming down there. This is where I can soften those clavicles. So I'll pick like a mid-tone and then just go through and nuke a little bit of that. Just kind of, that airbrush will help us blend that in. So I can do some nice modeling with that as well. Hit areas that would have that darkness and then fade off. The sclera is never as white as you think it is. It's always a little bit sort of more of a mid-tone, or not a mid-tone, but not a brilliant white light or bright value. If we can see any sort of catch light or specularity, that would be the brighter thing, right? And if you can't see that, then likely you've blown it on your exposure. Which I maybe, you know, I want her other eye to feel like it's in that shadow, so it might have some catch light speck outside edge and the cornea as that comes in, and then maybe a hint on her lid, and then that would just fall off. So here as well, we've combined that value, so I'm also just painting brighter value on top instead of blending that in, right? So that's an option that I have. Maybe I put some rim light, start to put some rim light on that side of her face. Maybe she gets a tiny bit of catch light on that inside edge. And then even her nose, the bridge of her nose could have a little soft rim. And that's when the airbrush is really good for us to kind of cut some of that stuff in. I can detail some of the eyelashes. Brandon, you get a pet bat? No, I'm good, thanks. Never thought of smudging the lines. Yeah, no, it's a really easy way of incorporating some shadow, right? So usually not great when you're dealing with lighter values, but even then what you can do is you can paint some of those values down and still use them as like a fall off or a decay, or kind of like the rounding of a shadow on a form. So it can be pretty useful. Can we try horror after you finish sci-fi? I might do like a little Dora the Explorer character design, but a horror version. Are you gonna add color? Yeah. we'll probably next stream, what we might do is do the same thing. We'll just go through and kind of cut in all the lines, incorporate them, so she's ready to go, and then we can start to shoot some color in there. One of the things, the easiest things for skin tones is to look at skin tones, right? If we're looking at reference, for instance, here, we have skin tone, right? But it's skin tone in a certain light. And so, you know, if this person's in a studio with a bunch of white light, it's usually pretty good to get a sense of what the skin tone is. I can take that, I can put that into my piece, and it looks weird in the setting where she's riding her horse through this, you know, golden hour sunset thing, right? It's because the lighting's different. The quality of light, the only reason why you're seeing me on camera is the quality of light. And so this really warm light off to my right hand side is making my flesh seem way more yellow than it is. The white light coming in from my monitor is a little bit of pink in that, is also making it, you know, respond a little bit better and show you the true color of my flesh. But also there's a hint of pink in my background, so you're getting a pinker representation there, right? So you have to go and find reference for the kind that maybe if you're dealing with a certain race, ethnicity, try and find an example of that race, ethnicity kind of model in a lighting situation that works well, and then just be sampling those colors, right? You can come to it by kind of laying down the colors as they should be seen in white light, and then kind of try and incorporate some of the colored light as it mixes in with your skin tones, for sure, right? But there's so much reference out there that you can be drawing from. And then when you're doing it, try and observe, you know, oh, okay, well, this is sort of an African-American woman, or say like a European man or whatever, right? And they're in this lighting, they're in that lighting. What's happening with their skin and how's that coming through? And the, you know, the skin's reflecting that light and mixing with it, right? So that's how I would tend to think about my colors as I'm going through there. And not just her skin, her hair, the hat, the jacket, the horse, the saddle, everything, right? I want to know what its local color is, and then I want to know how it's being affected. And I don't want to just make that up, right? Because you can do it. You can stumble around in the dark trying to find the answers on your own and then come out the other side having been lucky with that, right? Maybe you're even using some principles of color theory, but it is a lot easier to understand the inner workings of it and then try and project that through. And then the next time you don't have to lean so hard into learning. You might, with enough practice, remember what you did, right? And so this is why you get specialists in certain areas where they just spend so much time with characters, for instance. They're really well versed with skin tones, or hard surface designers where they're really well versed with modeling uniform surfaces or mechanical objects and volumes in space, more so than somebody that does a lot of creature design, say, does, right? So anyway, long sort of answer to your question, but it's a good question. Yeah, so it's about time for us to wrap up. So we got pretty far today where we were adding, you know, we started with just the line work, and then we started kind of adding everything in underneath, and we're starting to kind of get there. And so, yeah, you know, try this on your own. Start with warming up. I really do think, you know, when we were doing the life drawing, it helps you kind of stay loose and not be so rigid, and you get your mind off of things, and then you can kind of enter this kind of thing, no matter what, if we're doing line work or value or color rendering, that kind of thing. It's a really good way of kind of getting yourself into that mind frame. So anyway, thanks everybody for showing up. Yeah, we're still going to be working on some more render if you want, with the sci-fi containment unit on Thursday. So drop by for that. And I think we'll be able to get to some color for that. So that would be a really good one if you're interested to hop by. Otherwise, we'll come back to this next Monday, and we will start adding some color. Otherwise, have a great week, everybody, and we will see you next time. Take care.